So today, I thought I'd talk a little bit about a guy I used to know a few years ago here. Back in 2008, I went through quite a difficult period financially, and to earn a few quid, I thought I'd get some work, and I ended up working for a guy on a boat, just part-time work, and the guy was called Paul, and I was doing all sorts of jobs on the boat for him, and the boat was a Sunseeker Predator, 68 feet I think it was. Very nice boat, very nice. And at first I thought he was the owner, but I realized he wasn't the owner. The owner was a wealthy Lebanese man who lived in London, who was in the fashion trade or fashion or whatever. And so I ended up doing quite a lot of work on this boat. And after a short time, Paul sort of just let me do the work. He trusted me to turn up, and I knew where the keys were kept, and I'd let myself on board. And in the morning, I'd grab a coffee, and I'd grab a croissant or whatever on the way. And the boat was in the Marina Gulf, which is halfway between sort of Antibes and Cannes. It's a very nice place. Pretty expensive marina, but that's boating for you. And anyway, so I was doing all this different jobs on the boat. I'd do the wash downs. I'd do the teak work. I'd help with the even changing the oil in the engines, that sort of thing. Do some repairs as and when, because I'm from a yachting background. I used to have my own boat, so that's the reason I wanted to do that sort of work. And anyway, and after a while, Paul would just sort of trust me to turn up, and he just call me and say, turn up tomorrow maybe, and whatever, do this, that, or the other, and I'd turn up, and quite often I'd be there on my own all day, doing whatever I was doing on the boat. And I quite liked it because you were in the marina, and it was, the sun was shining, sun glittering off the Mediterranean Sea, and you think, well, this is not too bad. I've been in worse situations than this, and I'm getting paid for it as well. So that was sort of an interesting period of my life. And Paul would turn up later, and he'd start the day with a joint and a large glass of 50-50 whiskey and water. And he could drink a lot. Let's just leave it at that. But there were some funny times. So they were really quite amusing times. There was a time that he decided he drove this Mercedes, and we'd motored from Cannes to Gulf one day on the boat, and I'd left my motorcycle in Cannes, and so he gave me a lift back so I could pick up my motorcycle and ride back home. But he'd recently had this really nasty injury to his foot, so he was on this painkiller medication. And of course, these really powerful painkillers, they sort of stress, don't mix with alcohol. Well, Paul being Paul, that wasn't going to happen. there was going to be alcohol consumed. So we drove back to Cannes, and I thought, I was really glad we didn't hit anything. And then we got into Cannes, and there's an elevated section of the road that goes straight through Cannes. It's like a bypass, but it goes right through the town. It's really ugly anyway. And the first traffic lights, the car in front of us stopped, and we hit it straight away because we couldn't stop in time. Paul couldn't stop in time. And the madame got out, and she comes around, she inspects the back of her car, and Paul sort of maintains his innocence, and she gets back in her car. The lights change to green. The next set of lights, exactly the same thing happens. She gets out again. This time, she opens the boot of her car just to make sure that the mechanism hasn't been affected in any way whatsoever, and gets back in her car after some conversation with Paul. I can't remember what he said to her, and this happened the third time, and I thought, oh, this is ridiculous. She's going to call the police, but she didn't. He's amazingly lucky. He's a guy with 9 lives, so that was an amusing time. But yeah, he seemed to have 9 lives. I don't know. I mean, there was one time when he asked me to come along on a Sunday morning, turn up at the boat. So I turn up, and it's really, really quiet. And I think, but the weird thing was, normally the boat's all locked up if there's nobody there, because, and everything was open. I thought, that's a bit odd. But I thought no more of it, and I was going about doing whatever I was doing that day. And then a couple of hours later, this guy from a boat, a couple of boats away on the quay, said, you know what happened to Paul? I said, no. I thought he was downstairs asleep. He said, no, I pulled him out of the Marina last night. He's in the hospital. So, but he recovered from that. I mean, the water in the marinas is really, you really don't want to swallow that stuff. It's nasty. So anyway, and there was another time we were decorating the apartment owned by the owner of the yacht, and Paul would sort of get everything ready for the painting the doors, because the doors were really difficult because there were 2 color schemes on the doors. It was like a white and a yellow, so the inner panels of the doors was yellow. The owner had terrible taste. Having loads of money doesn't mean you have taste, and this was a case in point. So Paul got all the paint ready, and I've been doing loads of work. I've been preparing the walls, filling in plaster and sanding and everything else. And he said, okay, I'm going to do the doors. And he got all the paint ready and the rollers ready and everything. And I was doing some other job in another room. And about 2 hours later, I thought, it's really quiet, isn't he? And I wandered in, no sign of him. He's in the bedroom, snoring away on the bed. And that was what it was like working for him. It was funny, and he had a habit of falling overboard. I never once fell overboard, thank God, but he fell overboard quite regularly, and he'd have these arguments with his wife, and then he'd move out, and he'd move out onto the boat. And so I'd sort of turn up, and he was living on the boat then. And he'd tell me all about all the terrible things that his wife had done or said or whatever about their kid, and it's just amazing. I mean, the amazing thing is that some people, you look at some people's lives, and from an outside point of view, you'd think, his life was pretty good because he had this job where he only worked a few months during the summer. The owner didn't use the boat at all the rest of the year. He had to go around to the apartment and maybe water some plants a few times in the winter, and that was it. And yet, he was constantly sort of complaining about how terrible things were, and that's just people, isn't it? Yeah, they're just different. Anyway, unfortunately, I don't see him anymore. I stopped doing that quite a long time ago, but that was an interesting period of my life, and I'm glad of the experience. I think every experience sort of rounds you as a human being. You shouldn't just dismiss physical work. Physical works actually can be quite rewarding in its own way. And it's nice being out on the boat. I used to go out sometimes. We take the boat out to between the islands, and the island of Saint Marguerite and Sainte Helene, just off the coast near Cannes, anchor up, and it was quite nice. So anyway, that was my experience with Paul, and God knows where he is today. But he's got 9 lives, so he will no doubt survive.